Well, my name's Hazel Edwards, and I'm the author of There's a Hippopotamus on the Roof Eating Cake. But there are a few other stories in that collection too. And one of the reasons that we're filming on Skype here today is so that if you look up there, this is the roof of the house, which gave the idea for the hippopotamus when the roof leaked, when it was a new house 40 years ago, which is probably older than your parents. It's really, really old. And ideas can come from anywhere. In fact, the very best ideas for stories come when something goes wrong. And that's why writers have to be very persistent. So I'm going to share with you, I think some of you would know the original There's a Hippopotamus on the Roof Eating Cake, but I won't read that one at the moment. I'd like to share a couple of the other hippopotamus stories with you, because stories can go into other languages. Now, in the case of, I'll just get these, by the way, they're my notes. That's my hippo clip. Somebody gave me a hippo clip for keeping things together so I didn't lose things. And you'll notice there's a few hippo bits and pieces behind me. But this story of Hey Hippopotamus, Do Babies Eat Cake Too? That was written because a family that we knew were trying to think of a name for their baby that was coming. And the little girl in the family, who would be the sister of the new baby, her aunts and uncles teased her and they said all sorts of weird and wonderful names. And naming a book is a bit like naming a baby. You've got to think of something really interesting to call it. But when you've got, in this case now, 7 hippopotamus books, they've got to sound a little bit different. So this one is, Hey Hippopotamus, Do Babies Eat Cake Too? And my son thought of this name when he was younger. I used to pay my children to think of titles, and then they all left home and I had to think of titles for myself. So in this one, you'll notice that the hippopotamus is, just a minute, wait till we get to here. Hey hippopotamus, do babies eat cake too? I've got a daddy and a big brother, but we haven't had a baby before. So I told my hippopotamus, who lives on the roof and eats cake, he knows everything about babies. Now, in this story, Deborah Nyland drew the illustrations. She drew the illustrations for all the hippopotamus books. And I think some writers think that illustrators and writers live next door. They don't necessarily. Just like Zooms and Skypes today, you can work with someone who lives a very long way away, and she does. And I hadn't met her when she did the first hippo book. And then I did meet her later on in Sydney. And do you know what? I thought, my goodness, the dad in the story, that's her husband. She drew her husband in the story. And quite a lot of writers will draw their cats or their dogs or their children and sometimes their husbands. And if you look very closely at the teacher and the mother in the hippo books, they look a bit like Deborah Nyland, the illustrator. So it's not my family that's illustrated there. So in a way, she looks a little bit like the mum in this one here. Now, in this page here, where then I asked Mummy, is our baby in your tummy now? She nods. Was I in your tummy too? Yes. Why didn't I see the baby then? Mummy and Daddy laugh, but my hippopotamus knows what I mean. Now, that was something one of my children said a long time ago, and I jotted it down in my ideas notebook. All writers have an ideas notebook. And I thought that really fits this part of the story. And so rather than me reading all the way through the story, which you can read for yourselves, I'm just going to point out a couple of things in here, because you should always look at the illustrations and the words in the story. And what I do when I write a book is I write a little letter to the illustrator, whether it's Deborah Nyland or it's Serena Geddes who did Hijabi Girl, or whoever it is, and say, dear whoever, could you please draw? And I make a few suggestions, but in the end, they make up their own minds. And originally, I wanted the little person in this story to be a boy or a girl, so it could be someone who was in the T-shirt and jeans. But at that stage, Deborah Nyland had a little girl, so she drew a girl. And lots of illustrators do that. They bring their families into the stories. But this is the next baby in the story. And so people were saying, well, what's the baby's name? Now, I deliberately didn't give the baby a name. Grandma's in the kitchen. We make pizza. She asked me, is the baby's name Pizza? We laugh. I say, no. Now, that was based on the American family that teased the little girl. Their name was Hogan. And they used to have all these funny names for the baby, who eventually, in their real life, I think got a very conventional name, not Pizza or Bike or anything like that. So that's where those stories, that's my favourite picture with the rainbow hippopotamus. So down here where it says, wait till we get to the right page, about whether you know what the name is, and I deliberately didn't give a name because I wanted whoever was reading the book to think it was theirs. Do you want a brother or a sister? I don't know. Sometimes I like to have a baby. Other times I don't want one. My hippopotamus wants the baby to look like me. And that's what the story's about. When there's a new baby coming, you think, oh, will there still be room for me or not? Yes, of course there will be. And so my uncle gave me a dolly and a cot. What's your baby's name, he asked. I don't know yet. Uncle smiles. Is it a no-name dolly? I say, yes. My hippopotamus knows my name because it's on my clothes. And he has got a name, really, but that's our secret. And so Deborah's drawn the hippo, keeping a secret. See if you can have putting a secret face on at the moment. Keeping a happy secret face. Now, a grumpy secret face. Now, an illustrator has to think of all the ways of drawing that. So in this one, Daddy woke me up. Our baby's here, he said. I went to see the no-name baby. It was red, squashy and beautiful. Daddy told me the baby's name and it's just right. Now, I deliberately didn't give a name, but one of the readers, and a reader is a very important part in making a book work, and you are the readers. One reader said, I know what the baby's name is. It's Just Right. Now, at that stage, there was a cereal that had come out called Just Right. And they said, oh, I think the baby's name's Just Right. Now, that's a very clever reading of the story. And that reader is entitled to think that because they're using their imaginations too. Now, that may not look like the same book, but it is. This is for children who are blind, who feel the little bumps that say the words of the same story as the baby story. And unfortunately, we haven't got fairly Skype to enable you to do that, but I'm sure your teachers will explain about Braille. Now, some children who are deaf use Auslan signing. So I'm going to teach you how to say, I love hippopotamus in sign language. So if you'd like to stand up, give yourself a hug. That's I love hippopotamus is 3 really big bulges like that. And you give a thumbs up because you got it right. And you give a clap, but not the way you'd normally give a clap. You give a silent clap. So it's I love hippopotamus, thumbs up, and a silent clap. So stories can go into lots of different languages. Now, the hippopotamus on the hospital roof eating cake, which is one of my favourites, you might think, oh, that's a very knocked around book. But that is the Braille copy of the hippopotamus on the roof eating cake. And so on these pages are all the little bumps. There's 1 bump for A and 2 for E and so on, B and so on. Not 26 for Z, they're in different spots. And so that's why it's bound in that way, which means that if in your family you have somebody who reads Braille and somebody who doesn't, you can read the story together. And in the same way, when a story goes into a totally different language, and it's possible, I went and put this one away, it's possible that your family has, oh, here we are, this is the same story, but it is in Chinese. It's written in Mandarin. And so it might be that your grandparents speak a different language. Maybe you do Italian at school or some other language, and you can sit down and you can read the book together because it's either got both languages or you have one copy in English and you have one copy in the other language. So stories can go into lots of different languages. The other thing I wanted to share, and then some people love the hippo stories so much that they write their own. And so this was a prep class, prep PB, and it's really a compliment. It's not infringing copyright, librarians, it's all right, where they follow the shape of the story. And this class put their own story together about things that they thought the hippo could do on the roof, playing with a friend, playing soccer, eating fruit, flying a kite, doing all sorts of things. So they made their own story. Now, in my family, I write a story for each child, each birthday. That's their birthday present. Now, this is one child, our middle grandson, whose name's Henry. He looks a bit older than that now. But this was written for him with photographs. And so who is hiding? And it was made into a proper book, but you can do it in a little one like this if you want to, too, just a little folded up one. Here we are. And so who is hiding? A question's a really good one to do. Henry likes to hide. Now, this is when you write a story about a real person, and we used the real photos of that year of his life, but we faked this one with the shoes because we needed that in the story. So we used all the photos and we made sure that we put pictures of all his family in there. So that might be a story, a way that was my husband being scary in the shower. We mocked that one up too, about going, playing hide and seek. So that's how you might make your own story too. And some of the children, I worked in the Antarctic, which is right down the bottom of the world, very, very cold. People go there for a year. And some parents write back to they all write back, but parents write to their children at home. And that was the idea behind Antarctic Dad. And the dad takes a little toy, in this case, the kangaroo, and puts it in places all around the Antarctic, takes photos and sends back to his son. That's what happened in real life too. And that was the ship that went. And back home, there's the warm colours, and in Antarctica are the cold colours. Now, one other simple way you can do it, one of my grandsons is called Arafura, and for his first birthday, we wrote a story about the fact that the part of his name that's Arafura is on labels everywhere, because in Darwin, that's the name of the area, like yours is called Tamworth. And so that's the story for him, including his footprint and a few things like that for the first year of his life. And so we went round and we got lots of signs with Arafura on them. The Arafura Games, the Arafura Council. So you come up with an idea that might be something that you could share in your family. The very last one I want to show you is Hijabi Girl, because I think this would make a very good serial. It's going to be a puppet play with larrikin puppets. It was to be now, but because of the pandemic, it will be next year. And each of the characters in here have really different personalities, and they're probably in a school a little bit like your school too, and they do lots of different things. But she wants to start an Aussie Rules football team. This is Malik here. And the Vietnamese girl, Tien, is fantastic at drawing stuff. Zach, who's mad keen on soccer, is and has a rat called Rattus, is really keen on mucking up everything. And we have another character over here who likes playing and dressing up in characters. So we have lots and lots of stories, and I wrote that with Erskine, who is a librarian, who said there's not many stories around about a girl in a hijab. And so it's great to read stories about people like yourself. And if there aren't enough stories, why not write your own? Now, I understand that you have some questions for me to answer.
We do. We have some questions. So some of the lovely students have come up with some questions that they would like to ask you. So the first one is, why did you pick a hippo to be the animal in all your books?
Well, that, Amy and children, was because the idea came from my then 4-year-old son. In this house, when the roof leaked and the water poured all down the walls, and when the workman came to fix it up on the roof, he said, "That's the hippopotamus up there that eats cake." And we said, "Why is it hippopotamus?" He says, "It just is. Can't you hear it?" And of course, on the roof, you've got lots of bangs and crashes. You could imagine it was a hippopotamus. And we said, "Why does it eat cake?" Because I don't know whether you know, but in real life, hippopotamuses eat carrots. They said perhaps it could be carrot cake, but it definitely eats cake. And across the years, lots of children have had book parties with cake for the hippo. So we've had a cake of soap. We've had carrot cake. We've had cake that a hippopotamus put his foot in and was a bit messy. We've had hippopotamus footprints in cake and biscuits. So the hippopotamus story is gluten-free. We've had the whole bit. Imaginary, seen only by very imaginary people in an empty plate. So the hippopotamus does eat cake. And I don't know why, but he does. And when it went into an American edition, they said, shouldn't it be something healthier? Couldn't he eat celery sticks or something? We said, no, he's got to eat cake. And he's the big friend that all of us would like to have, who solves problems. So for a long time, we used to set a place at the table for the hippopotamus, because lots of children have friends that other people can't see, and that's fine.
Awesome. Thank you. The next question is, why are they always on the roof?
Well, it's because that's where the idea started from. And my son who's called Trevelyan, who's written a couple of his own books since then, different sorts of books about walking the Appalachian Trail and riding a bike for 5 months around Europe. But at that stage, he said, well, just that's where he was. He was on the roof. And so we got used to that. And now we have children who come and knock at our front door and say, is there really a hippopotamus on the roof? And I say, have a look.
Very good. And I think we've answered some of the questions. So some of the questions were, do they like cake? Which we've answered. So do you like hippos?
Well, I didn't know a lot about hippopotamuses before I wrote that book. It was more that it came from the idea. But since then, people keep giving me hippopotamuses. This is one interesting one here. I don't know whether you can see it. It's very heavy, this one. This
very
is a rainbow, which is a sort of paperweight. And inside I've got very kind people have given me all sorts of hippopotamuses, but one was a bath plug. I do read in the bath. You're not supposed to tell librarians that, but a hippo bath plug is not quite my thing, and a hippo toothbrush somebody gave me too. But it's interesting. Some people are very fond of one kind of animal, and there are lots of people who love and collect hippopotamuses. Some of them collect frogs, some of them collect butterflies or pictures of, and some people, I'm amazed to find, collect hippopotamuses. But my collection's been sort of because people were very kind. Somebody even made me a Fabergé egg with a hippo in it, which was just beautiful.